Well, hey, everybody, it's great to be with you as we wrap up our series. And if you've been around for the last couple of weeks, you probably figured out by now, this is like a how-to series, right? Which is great. And it really works like this, is that what we're doing here is how to prepare to get to where you got to go from where you currently are, that you just got to from where you recently were, all right? So, okay, everyone clear with that? Well, maybe the short form way of saying it is it's just really how to prepare for what's next. This then is a series about change, a series about transition. And it's for everybody because, think about just the decade that we've been in, the 2020s, and all the change that has happened in just, 3 years or less. And more is coming, guys. And so the only real constant thing that's going on in our lives, it would seem, is change. And so we want to talk about what to pack for the journey into the future. So let me just give you a real quick review of where we've been. In week 1, we talked about what you need to pack is that you need to pack a teachable spirit. You and I do. We said that if we want to be prepared for what's next, we need to learn what needs to be learned from what's now and what's been. And not only that, we found this out in week chapter 2, is that we also need to pack some skill in decision making. And we spent some time in the book of Proverbs, and we got a couple of real big ideas from the book of Proverbs. And the first one is to do not trust your heart, trust God with your heart. That's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And then this next one, do not make decisions alone. Ask wise people to help you. We need to ask the right people the right questions. And so now, why we're going through all this trouble and all this effort to do this is because change is tough. Change is unsettling. And change can create massive amounts of stress in our lives. So just so that we can lock into that, let's take a look at some common change points, and I think you know what I mean. New school, graduation, health-related issues, that's a tough one. A wedding, that represents big change. Baby on the way, huge change. How about this loss one? For many of us is that we have been dealing with the loss of a loved one, with bereavement. And it's been a real big challenge. There's the breakup. That's a big deal. A lost job, a new job. What about a move? An empty nest stage of life. And then we've talked about like the boomerang effect, where the empty nest, kind of comes back and now it's a full nest and who knows what's going to happen with that. Retirement, which is that a thing? We don't know. So there's just a lot of change that we have to navigate in the course of our lifetime, and they're all tough. But let me zero in on one that I think is actually really especially tough, and that's a new job. That's a new job. But can you recall a time, and maybe the time is now, that you're navigating like what a new job's all about, being a new job? Man, it's tough, right? There's a lot of stress that's involved in having a new job. There's a lot of pressure in it because you're wondering, right? Wondering what the future holds in it. Are you going to be good at your new job? Are you going to like your boss and like your coworkers? Is this new job going to promise a good big horizon for advancement, and moving up, and all that stuff, and then think about what it was like to have that first day at the new job. With all the new, that could be kind of tough, can't it? Because we think about just all that's going on with that. It can be super tough, and so don't you wish that the first day in a job would be like a day at Disneyland? So for me, it actually was. Tell you a story. I took a new job once in my pastoral career, early on in my career as a church in Orange County that hired me. And I went down after I got hired and I did the onboarding thing. It was a big church, and so it had like an HR department. And so the HR director sat me down and gave me the keys and gave me the codes and had me sign the contracts, and then told me about the starting day. I had a starting day, and she said, your starting day is going to be May the 1st. And it just so happens that on May the 1st is that we have scheduled a staff development day at Disneyland. I know, she said 30 of our pastors and staff and you at Disneyland on May 1st, plus Club 33. Okay, so some of you guys know the secret 5-star restaurant in Disneyland, Club 33. I'd never been. I was excited, and it had been a long time since I've been at Disneyland, and I just thought, man, this is going to be a pretty chill job, and this is going to be great. And yet I feel pressure. And the pressure that I felt was that I wanted to make a good first impression, and that we know is that you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. And so I remember what I did the night before is, because, this was important, is that I laid my clothes out. Did any of you ever do that? Something big, is going to happen. You got to lay your clothes out the night before. You got to be really strategic because, you just want people to know what you're all about. And so I remember laying out, first of all, I laid out my shoes, basketball shoes, because I wanted people to know that I was a baller. And then I laid out, a pair of shorts because I wanted, everybody wanted them to know is that my job was a youth pastor, okay, so a pair of shorts. And then my shirt, what I was going to wear, T-shirts. Now, it was back during a time that was like the apex of the action sports world apparel movement. And so everyone was wearing Quicksilver, Billabong, Hurley, Vans. And I pulled out a shirt that a buddy of mine gave me. He had gone to Europe a couple months before. He went to England, and there was this really cool boutique surf and skate brand that was in England. And the brand was called Chaos. It was spelled with a K. And so I had my Chaos shirt on, and I thought, all right. Okay, that had a little edge to it, because, for sure, there was no one in the entire park that was going to be rocking a Chaos shirt. I felt great about that. And so I wake up that morning, I pull on all my gear, I eat a full and nutritious breakfast, and then I head down to the most wonderful place on earth, to Disneyland, and there they are, the 30 other staff people, brand new people that I'm getting a chance to meet. They're super nice. We're chatting it up as they're waiting for the park to open, and finally the park opens, and then I begin to do and they do, what all of us do when the park opens, is you run to the most popular ride, right? I mean, the first and best ride is that you sprint to the ride that that is the best ride, the most popular ride, because you know that if you wait till later in the day to do that ride, you're going to be waiting in line for hours and hours and hours. And so these guys just take off. And I'm like, I don't know where to go. It's been a long time since I've been to Disneyland. And then they take off, and that they just sprint, and they sprint to a ride called Star Tours. Now, some of you may know that Disney, they bought, the whole, Star Wars, thing, the whole enterprise from Lucasfilm and such. And so Disney is like all in, with the whole Star Wars thing. They got Star Wars Land, if you've been there recently. I mean, it's a pretty elaborate thing. I mean, here it is, man, the Millennium Falcon, the scale version of it. It's just in great. But back then, there was only one Star Wars brand attraction, and it was called Star Tours. Okay, Star Tours. And so we just ran into Star Tours. We're real excited to be there. And as we're moving in, I'm getting in this ride, and the ride inside looks like this. And it's like being in a giant like a dumpster. They've got seats in it and stuff, and they strap you in, and they make you think that like you're moving through space, but you're actually just looking at stuff on a screen. And then I suppose that they have on the outside like big hydraulic arms that basically make the thing just like jerk around. And so you're just jerking around, and we're flying through, and everyone's excited, but I'm less excited because I am beginning to feel queasy. I'm beginning to feel the onset of nausea. But then, sure enough, and thank the Lord, is that the ride ended. Okay, and so I knew that I was spared, and that we ran out of that place, and that they began running to a new attraction, and the attraction that they were running to is an attraction called Space Mountain. Okay, they're running to Space Mountain. I'd never been to Space Mountain before, but the group was going, and so I was going. And I felt like I had fairly recovered. I was doing okay. And you just need to know something about Space Mountain. This is what Space Mountain looks like with the lights on, like for reals. Okay, this is actually what it looks like. So for those of you who have not been, it's just a big giant roller coaster inside a thing, right? But you never know that because during the ride is that the lights are off mostly. Okay, you're pretty much in the dark, most of the time, doing your thing. It's very exciting. And so anyway, get to Space Mountain. All my 30 new friends, everybody straps in. We're in the little cars. They're excited. I just dodged the bullet at Star Tours, and so the ride commences. And it's this roller coaster that's inside, and you can't see where anything's going, all the twists and all the turns. By about turn 3, I began to feel that feeling again that I had at Star Tours, the queasy feeling, the nausea feeling. And then by about turn 5, I began to believe that my chaos shirt was going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I got to tell you, okay, so I almost made it to the end of the ride. But at the end, as we kind of get to the end of the ride, there's that staging area, just right before we get to the staging area, is that I barfed all over myself, including my Steezy Chaos shirt and my shorts and my basketball shoes, in front of all my new friends and colleagues. And as I walked out of the ride, out of the ride, a Space Mountain, and then I went home and changed my clothes and got back to Disneyland, but only after they had all had lunch at Club 33. I missed it. I decided that I hate my new job. Now, I bet some of you motion sickness people is that you probably all got a story like that, and then if you ever wonder why? It's like why are you cursed with this? Like what's going on with this motion sickness thing? And so come to find out is that if you study why you get nauseated on rides like Space Mountain and Star Tours, why it mess with you and you puke your guts out, it's because those kinds of rides mess with our balance. You see, our bodies begin to when we're out of balance, begin to warn us that something is wrong and that you don't have the stability that you once had. And that's the problem with change. That's the problem with what's next. Because you see, the very nature of transition causes us to lose our balance. It causes us to lose our balance, to lose the stability that we felt like that we once had. And so when we get motion sickness in life, though, with change, the things we talk about is that it actually feels less like nausea and it feels more like depression and anxiety and loss. And so let's ask this question. What do you need in the midst of significant transition? I mean, what's going to help? Well, I think what helps is to have something to focus on. All right, motion sickness people, this, when you get in a car and the friends or family drive you up in the mountains and it's a twisty, windy road, is that where do you want to be seated? The front seat, right? You want to be the front seat because you want to be looking out, all right, and seeing what's going on and what's next. You want to just be able to identify what's happening in front of the windshield instead of something else. Okay, that's just super important. Okay, you can be able to survive, and you want to have a focal point. You want to have a point of orientation because that's what's going to bring stability. And it's what you do with yoga poses. Some of you do yoga. I do yoga every now and then. And you find that there are the balance poses in yoga. There are poses like the tree pose. There are poses like the dancer pose. There are poses like Warrior 3. And some of these poses where you're always up on one leg or the other leg. And that when you're in those classes and you're in those poses, the instructor is going to tell you, says, now what you need to do so that you don't fall out of the pose, what you need to do is that you need to focus your eyesight on something that's ahead of you and something that won't move. There's usually a mark on the floor. I said, focus on that and that you'll be okay and that you can do the pose. And so what this yoga instructor is telling us and what we know when we're driving twisty mountain roads is that a focal point is what you center on and it makes all the difference. And it especially makes all the difference when change comes, when turbulence comes, when imbalance comes. Let's go. So now, we're getting to the place in our time together where maybe, some of you are thinking that you can probably anticipate, what a pastor like me is going to say next, They're going to say something like, well, God is the one that you need in the midst of a significant transition. Maybe you're thinking somebody like myself would say, well, God is the one that needs to be your focal point. Or maybe, you're thinking, anticipating, especially if you know the hymns, you're thinking, okay, I know he's going to say next is that he's going to say, on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. So that's what you're thinking. And maybe with all of this, maybe you're not so sure. You see, maybe you're thinking, if God's really around, then why have things not gone so well in my life? And when it comes to the question how to prepare for what's next, I mean, can I really count on a God that I can't see or can't touch or can't hear, especially when I'm dealing with some really big life changes, especially when things are tough? But did you know that once upon a time in the first century, there was a group of people who began to follow Jesus, and then things got tough? It was in the first century, and it was in the Roman Empire. And during this time of the Roman government, as they began to identify and understand this Jesus movement, these followers of Jesus, is that the government was not kind to them. Is that the government made life hard for them, persecuted for them, found creative ways to torture them, even to kill them in creative and macabre ways. And life was tough. And if that weren't enough, is that for some that were from a Jewish background, is that they had friends and family members that might have been sad or disappointed or even worse when it came to their perception of you and the decision that you made in their mind to turn and walk away from the beliefs and the religions of your ancestors. And so if anybody needed encouragement, it was these folks. And that we have a record of encouragement given to them called the book of Hebrews. And so we're going to land through the rest of our time in the book of Hebrews. And so what I'd like to invite you to do, if you brought a copy of the scriptures, is turn to the book of Hebrews chapter 6. And go ahead and turn there. And I'd also invite you to pull out that outline that we provided for you here, or if you have it on your phone on the app. And let's go ahead and follow along, as that we're going to talk a little bit about the book of Hebrews. And let me just start by giving you some background. So Hebrews was written by... Actually, we don't know who it was written by. Some people think that it was Paul that wrote the book of Hebrews, but I seriously doubt that he did. Some people think that it might have been one of his colleagues or associates like Barnabas or Apollos, but we just don't know. But what we do know is that the people that were on the receiving end of the letter were Jewish background believers, because peppered through this letter are Old Testament scriptures and Old Testament characters and Old Testament concepts that such an audience would be familiar with. And so we know that, and also due to the context is that we can imply that these people were struggling with something. Here's what they were struggling with. They were struggling with whether or not following Jesus was worth it. Whether he was someone they could build their lives on, someone who would be a solid focal point in their lives. Now, the writer tries to communicate to them that Jesus is the ultimate revelation of God's love and mercy. And in a world of change where we're in so need of balance, as the writer is trying to say, is that we should focus on Jesus. We should focus on him. And the writer does this by reminding them of the guy who they saw as the first person of faith in God, like the original guy, very familiar to his Jewish background audience. So let's go ahead and begin in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 13. It says this. It says, when God made his promise to Abraham, okay, that's the guy, right? And he's the guy who's the founder of faith. He's the founder of their faith. It says, when God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he's talking about God couldn't swear by anybody else other than himself, is that God swore by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. And so after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. Now, it's the Jewish people that were the original receivers of this letter. When they got this, I mean, their heads are just kind of nodding in the same direction, right? Because they're thinking, well, the promise, you know what? We're the promise. We're the descendants, and there's a lot of us. And Abraham, Abraham, we know how it all got started for him, is that he had a son, and he had that son in a real miraculous way. And so the writer of the letter reminds them of that, and now he wants to get into some fine details onto what happened. Let's take a look at the next verse. He says, people swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all arguments. So let's kind of break this down and think about this, as you can imagine, going back to fourth grade. Okay, so you're in fourth grade, you're on the playground, on the blacktop, and that you've got one of those red play balls, you know the ones, you know, those red balls, you know, and there's a bunch of them, and they bounce up and down, and you can play kickball with them and foursquare with them, and you got your red ball, and that you're there, and you're a fourth grader, and you're playing with your red ball, and life is good, and it's recess. But then up comes a fifth grader, okay? There's a fifth grader that comes up kind of aggressive, you know, fifth graders, they kind of got it going on, you know, they're very self-assured, and the fifth grader comes to you and says, hey, I want to borrow your ball, we're going to play over here, we're going to play some foursquare, can I borrow your ball, please, can I borrow your ball? And I'll promise I return it. And what are you going to do? You're going to go, I'm going to let you borrow my ball. And so here's what this fifth grader does. He says, no. He says, seriously. He says, I want to borrow your ball. We're going to need to borrow your ball. I promise. I swear to God, I'll bring it back. Okay, what's that fifth grader doing? Well, they're kind of doubling down, aren't they? They're saying, I promise, I promise, I promise, and I swear it'll happen. You know what that fifth grader did? Is that he just gave you an oath. He gave you an oath. And so here's the thing, is that oaths are big. They were big back then in that time. And they were formal expressions of a promise. And so the writer of Hebrews says, you know, God made an oath. He made an oath. And he did that because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purposes very clear to the heirs of what was promised. That's, you know, us. And he confirmed it with an oath. God did this so that by two unchangeable things, it was impossible for God to lie. Now you might be thinking, well, what two unchangeable things is he talking about? Well, first of all, the promise. God promised, he promised. And the second thing is the oath, where God just double downs and emphasizes the promise. It says, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. Now you're saying, okay, so greatly encouraged by what? Well, by two things. One is that God has made a promise. He's made a promise to save us, and that God has secondly sealed it with an oath. God has doubled down, not by just promising, by sending his very son, Jesus, to save us, to do the job. And then what's coming up is the most powerful statement that we might ever hear, all of us who are going through some sort of stage of transition. And so here it is. It says, we have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Firm and secure. We've got an anchor. We've got a point of focus. We've got something that we can arrange our lives around. And yet, maybe we're not so sure about that. Maybe we're thinking, hey, Lyle, there are some other focal points that are out there that perhaps I can anchor my life to, that I can place my hope in. Because during those times where we're just, really not sure about God, is that we wonder, maybe there's some other things that are out there that provide a better anchor. Like money. I mean, surely if we had enough money, is that we'd be able to smooth over any sort of change or transition that we would face in life. I mean, we could just buy our way out of it. I mean, talking about pack your bags, what to pack. I mean, you just need to pack piles of cash. Okay, then you'll be good, right? You need to pack a credit card and you'll be fine. I mean, that's what you pack, because money, we believe, can get us out of any jam that we find ourselves in. So maybe we can anchor ourselves to money. Or maybe, a more solid anchor would just be relationships. If we could just find the right relationship, I mean, that would solidify things for sure. We'd be great if we could just find the right person, somebody strong, somebody beautiful, someone that's into us, right? If we could find that person, then we figure that we could weather any kind of storm if we just had the right person. Or maybe it's the anchor becomes our own intelligence. They become our smarts, because, after all, we're smart people, right? I mean, we're in this, highly educated place. Education's high, literacy's high. I mean, super smart people. Look at the 21st century, all the things that we make and create, and that we're just uber smart. And that if we know stuff, and if we don't know stuff, we know how to Google and we know how to YouTube it, right? So that we think about that could be an anchor. And yet, the book of Hebrews tells us that there's an anchor that's better than any of these. It's an anchor of hope, firm and secure. And so moving through the letter of the Hebrews, is the writer then, I think, wants to convince us that is true. He wants to share reasons to the group that he's writing to this group of Jesus followers, Jewish background Jesus followers that he's writing to, about some reasons as to why you would want to seek God and trust God as an anchor, as a focal point of your life. And so if we were to look at the book of Hebrews, and that's what we're going to do, is that you would see just on display the nature and character of God. And so here's some reasons, some reasons of why we have an anchor of hope in Jesus. We have this anchor of hope because, first of all, because and this is, again, about the nature of character of God. Number one is that God offers rest. God offers rest. Take a look at Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9. Where the writer of Hebrews says, hey, there remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God, for anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his, okay? And do you remember that? If you remember the book of Genesis, is that God worked for 6 days in creating the earth, and the seventh day that he rested, so that there is that pattern that God gives us. And then the writer says, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. Now, why is this so important? Well, I'll tell you why it's important to me. Is because I'm looking for rest. How about you? I mean, you know what? Life is intense, man. It's tough. It's full. And that sometimes I just move through and I get to the end of the week and I am just gassed. And then I'm looking for rest. And oftentimes I feel restless. Oftentimes I don't feel like I sleep well. And then I'm not refreshed. And I'm not at the top of my game because I just feel just under the gun. And yet here it is that God says, well, I've got rest for you. I've got rest for you. And the type of rest that he had, as people take a look at this, as you might think, well, maybe, what he's talking about is that, you just rest when you die, right? It's like rest in peace, it's like enter the heavenly rest. I don't think that's what he's talking about. Or some of you might be thinking, I bet that what he's talking about is that you need to obey the Sabbath. You need to observe the Sabbath, and the Jewish culture is that the Sabbath is a Saturday, and from sun up to sundown, you need to make sure that you don't do everything, and you just need a rest, and that's going to get a deal. It's like one day, you just got to get, dialed in with the day. And it's really important, by the way, to dial in with that, but I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think what he's talking about is that the Sabbath day, or the Sabbath rest here, is not death, and it's not a day, it's actually a person. Because you see, Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew said, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden and burdened, and I will give you rest. And so what we come to find out is that God offers rest, and this rest is not in a day or it's not his death, but it's actually in the person of Jesus. We find rest when we connect with Jesus to make him our focal point every day, every hour, and moment by moment. Is that we can enter into a time of rest, even in the midst of stress. We can do that. And that seems to be what God is going after. It's just God's nature. It's his character. As God offers rest, that's not the only thing that God does. Is that also, second off, is that, God doesn't forget. God doesn't forget. As we skip through to Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10, there's a simple verse that says, God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. Now, take a look at this. And let me ask you, do you ever get in a place in life where you wonder, what's the use? Like, you throw up your hands, you just wonder, what's the use? What's the use of doing good? What's the use of living an other-directed life rather than a self-centered life? I mean, what's the use of that? Or what's the use of being a giver, instead of a receiver? Because, see, here's what happens, is that we live that way. And that we do those kinds of things, and it just seems like is that it has a kind of a short lifespan to it. People tend to forget it. They just kind of tend to move on. And it's like, what you did, it just seems like it was for nothing. Well, here, what God says, it's never for nothing. Because you see, God, he doesn't forget this kind of stuff. God doesn't forget. And God's not unjust in it because God just reminds us. Jesus actually said this. He said, what is it? Is it a cold cup of water that is given in my name will never be left unrewarded. So we need to recognize that, as we move through this life and as we seek to live courageously through the power of God's Holy Spirit and do all the good that we can to all the people that we can, is that, we can be assured, it is just so great. We can anchor ourselves. Our anchor of hope is that God, he doesn't forget these things, nor will he ever. But here's another one. This one might actually surprise you. Number 3 is that we have an anchor of hope because God disciplines us for our good. Okay, you ready for this one? This is an interesting one. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 7. The writer says, endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, it says, We have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought was best, but God disciplines us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness. All right. So some of you know that I have, Dane and I, we have 3 sons. And let me tell you, when my sons were young, I hated disciplining them. I hated it. But you know, what I hated even more was the thought of them lacking character and strength as adults. What I hated even more was the idea that they wouldn't have what it takes in life to live life wisely and well. So I think we all get this, right? I mean, and it's pretty important. I mean, and then we need to rearrange our thinking about this, because often is that we see the difficulties of life as proof that God does not love us, but actually the opposite is true. God is using those things, those hard things, to grow us up. And now this next one, really speaking of the nature and character of God, and the reason why we want to place Jesus as our anchor of hope, it's because God won't leave. God won't leave. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5, it says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. He's saying you could use that as an anchor, but that's a bad call. That's a bad play. Money's not a good anchor. It's not the best one. Instead, he says, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And then he says, so we say with confidence, and he quotes out of the Psalms, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? Now, these words speak to us, don't they? Because some of the greatest pain in life that we experience is when someone that's very important to us leaves. The check out. Some of the greatest pain in our life is when we were abandoned, or when we were forsaken, or when we were canceled, right? In this current moment. But here, the writer reminds them of this place in the Torah, actually in the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses gets Joshua ready to leave. And maybe you know that story about how Moses, he was the guy that led the children of Israel out of Egyptian slavery, captivity, through the wilderness to the edge of the land of Canaan, this promised land, this land that God had promised him. And then as the story goes, is that Moses passes the baton to Joshua, and he says, Joshua, it's your turn now. It's your time to lead. And so he says this as words of encouragement to Joshua. He says, Joshua, understand this about God. Know this about God as you lead, as you take this mantle of responsibility, is that God won't leave you. He won't desert you. He won't forsake you. God won't lead. See, when your hope is anchored in God, you're not alone. You're never alone. He's present. And so we need not to be afraid at all. And then there's this last one, number 5. This is an anchor of hope. This is a firm and solid anchor because God's unchanging. That's his nature. That's his character. The writer of the letter of the Hebrews kind of signs off this way. He just says this. He says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Yesterday and today and forever. And so when it comes to Jesus, we can anchor to him because he's constant. You know what we see from Jesus in the 4 biographies of Jesus' life, the 4 stories of Jesus' life, like the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, what we see him doing back then is still true today. It's just, he was just the same. And so even when our future is uncertain and the days ahead may prove difficult and many things can change on us and are going to change on us, Jesus doesn't change. He remains the same. So with all this, it just begs a question. It begs this question. Where is my life anchored? And is this anchor strong enough? Can we be honest with it? Can we think about this? I mean, where is my life anchored? And is my anchor strong enough? And what the writer of Hebrews is telling us and encouraging us as they encourage those groups of followers of Jesus all those years ago is that he's saying that we've got an anchor, guys. It's strong and it's secure. And it gives balance, and actually it moves us forward. Now, so I think that we all know how anchors work, with boats. It's like, anchors are there basically to try to keep something like at the same place, right? You anchor in a bay or a harbor, and that the anchor prevents the boat, from drifting into the shore, drifting into the rocks, drifting into the reefs. But that's not all anchors do. For example, this is a special type of anchor. This is called a cledge anchor, kind of an old one. But it works like this. And some of you know this that have been around boats, is that you know that when a ship runs aground, like when it gets stuck on a sandbar or on a reef, sailors will grab something like this and they'll grab a rope and they'll get into a rowboat and they'll row out from where the ship is stuck, and they'll roll out as far as they can out to sea, and then they'll sink this thing. And then they'll use a winch to pull their way into deep water. Now, this technique is known as cledging, and so here's the thing with it, is that cledging is all about what happens when you get stuck. And it's important for us to know that because sometimes we get stuck in life, don't we? Sometimes we feel stuck. And then when we get stuck, what we need to understand is that this anchor of hope exists to move us forward. Forward, which is the direction that God always is interested in, always wants to take us, taking us forward. And this is reflected in something very powerful that the writer of Hebrews shares in Hebrews chapter 12, and we're going to wrap things up with this. He says this. He says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, all these followers of Jesus and these people of faith, men and women of faith that have gone before us, he said, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. We're moving forward, guys. We're moving forward. And then he says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And then he says, hey, think about this. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. He's saying, guys, to the people back then and to us today, there is an anchor. There is a focal point. We are to fix our eyes on Jesus. And so here at Terra Nova, if you've been around, is that we love to spend time in the scriptures, and we believe that the scriptures inform us about how we are to live life. And that we're not just to learn things from a head knowledge standpoint, but we're trying to figure out how to work this through the grid of our own life, how to apply it. And so as we start things out, is that we see that our starting point is to be convinced that God's really worth it. He really is. And that's a belief thing. And then what we do with it, then here comes the application, is to fix our eyes on Jesus, to make him our focus. And as we close our time together, there's a way of doing that, this very thing that disciples of Jesus have been doing since the whole movement began. And what we call it here at Terra Nova is communion. And so I'd like to have the band come forward, and we're going to have a time of communion. I know that some church traditions call this the Eucharist, others call this the Lord's Supper, but we call it communion. And so here's what's going to happen. In a moment, the band's going to sing, and then we're going to have a time to move to the different corners of the room where there will be the bread and the cup. There is going to be bread that represents Christ's body, and there is going to be a cup that represents Christ's blood. And it is a reminder that Jesus endured the cross. He endured the cross for us, and it was shameful. It was a terrible, painful death, and that we are going to memorialize that and to remember that, and that we're also going to use it in this way, is that when we go to the tables and we take the bread and the cup, is that I would just want to encourage you to use this as a way of declaring to God and saying, Jesus, is that I anchor my life to you. Your life and my life, I anchor my life to you. I'm anchoring it to you. And also know this, that maybe this might be your moment where you want to follow Jesus, you want to begin a new life with him, is that this would be then a time when you come to the tables and take the bread and the cup, is that you would take the bread and you would take the cup, and that you would say to God, is that God, I take you into my life. And it's a celebration, guys. It says here in the scriptures, it was for the joy set before him that Jesus did this. It was just like such a strange thing to hear. There was joy in this. I mean, what sort of joy was there in such a painful and humiliating death? Well, I believe that the joy set before Jesus was this vision that he had where we would be together with him, where the divide that was created by our sins, the span that was created by our sins between us and the God that created us was somehow breached, and it was somehow made whole and healed. And the joy set before him was the incredible thought that Jesus had that someday there would be men and women that I cared about and loved so much would be rescued and saved and be fully alive and experience life that is indeed life. And so that's what we're anchoring on, guys. And so what I'd love to have you do is to go ahead and stand. Let's go ahead and stand together. And let's sing and enjoy the band as they lead us. And let's celebrate communion together.
Quietness of your grace, away from the noise of my mistakes. You lead me in ways that make me whole. Till I walk in paths that restore my soul. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. I will follow you. Into the wildness of your grace, away from the safety of my restraints. You lead me in ways that make me strong. Till I walk in paths where I belong. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Right here beside you. Everything I need, goodness and mercy, following me. Right here beside you, everything I need. Goodness and mercy, oh, now they're following me. follow. I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Wherever you go, I know I will follow. I will follow you. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Let's sing holy. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we will ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your
Heavenly Father, as when we look forward to changes, transitions in all of our lives, things that are next, sometimes just the motion sickness that change creates, especially when it's not change we were asking for or wanting, can create all this dysphoria in our lives, this lack of balance. And so tonight, whatever season we're in, whatever's now, whatever's next, we want to root ourselves firmly on you. We want to build our lives on your love, your steadfast, unchanging love, your love for us personally, your love for us collectively, your love for our world that we live in, our love for you, a love that we never have to question or doubt, because you have demonstrated your love for us in this, that while we were as far from you as we could possibly be, you died for us. And we would never have to wonder, ever, how you feel about us, even at our worst. So we're grateful. We want to say thank you tonight. But more than that, we want to say that we want to be grounded in your love as we head into this next season. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, hey, you can grab a seat for just a second as we're winding down. I want to remind you about that Connect card I was telling you about earlier, and that $2 for each Connect card going to the Wounded Warrior Project. So maybe you got started on that, and then other things started happening around you, and you didn't finish it. Now would be a great time for you to just put your finishing touches on that card. Let us know how we can be praying for you this week. One of the ways that we keep our balance when we're going through a lot is that we surround ourselves with great people who love us and walk with us. And so we would love to be that with you. And of course, while you're filling that out, don't forget about this Life Root brochure. This is it, like last call, final call. Fill that out, throw that in the offering basket too. You don't have to worry about ripping off any part of this. You can just check the things you're like, here's how it works. You write what group you're interested in. Sorry. And then really simply how we can get a hold of you this week. Drop that in the offering basket on your way out. And I'm excited. Great groups starting up. And those groups are going to be, as I mentioned, focusing on some really great content that we're going to be unrolling on the weekends as well, as we start off our brand new series next weekend, Move Up Weekend. It's going to be a fantastic weekend. And we're starting this brand new series called Healthy and Whole, the 90% that shapes your life, talking about physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness. It's going to be a great series, a great 4 weeks, and some great small groups. So that's what we got to look forward to coming up. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you back next weekend for the start of our brand new series. Thanks for being here tonight.